let's start with the big picture. How has the risk landscape changed for corporate security leaders over the past few years?
Well, look, I think risk landscape is something that's always been dynamic and will continue to evolve over time. I think what that means for businesses, big picture, in terms of how they're protecting their organizations, shifts how they have to think about implementation of technology and how technology hits operations. That's really where the rubber meets the road. And so in the retail environment, for example, we're seeing more civil unrest driving issues at retail locations, whether that's protests turning into looting or agitators within protests that are turning it into these violent situations. We've seen shootings that are targeting specific corporations in the last few weeks and months. And that's something that's becoming more publicly recognized. And I think things like social media that have the ability now to give anybody a platform creates an increased risk profile for organizations because monitoring that threat landscape with people who have this newfound platform and ability to reach hundreds and thousands of followers who otherwise would not have had that ability has really shifted how we have to think about scaling those programs.
Yeah, it seems like there's a lot more vectors to consider these days than there were in the past. So how should security leaders adapt their approach based on all those changes that you're talking about?
We talk a lot about silos, and I think that Gates, Guards, and Guns approach is a silo in and of itself, and sometimes there's sub-silos even within that segment. If you look at most corporate security programs' budget allocation, a disproportionate amount of it is spent on guards. And it's not to poo-poo on guards. I think they have their value and they have their place. I think that there's too much emphasis put on people doing tasks that could be automated. And I also think that, look, if you're a retailer and you've got hundreds or thousands of locations and you're placing guards at those locations, the real question is, how are you making the assessment of where you should be allocating those resources? And what data is driving that decision? Because in most cases, when we see it, it's really kind of gut feeling, or it's based on, store had a robbery, therefore we placed a guard there. Well, what's the likelihood that that person's going to come back and rob it again tomorrow? It kind of already happened. Now, maybe there's data to support that. But the question is, where's the data and how are you using it? And how are you using data to build corporate standards that you can apply to your allocation of those resources?
What predictions do you have for the corporate security industry?
Well, I really think data is gold in security. And I think security has an incredible amount of untapped gold right now. For an organization to effectively be able to gain insights from their data and automate some semblance of response from their data, you have to be able to standardize the outputs from different systems that each output stuff differently today. That's something we spend a lot of time thinking about, but it's a real challenge in a company today. You can just imagine if it goes super basic and you do a spreadsheet export from 5 different systems, and we'll just say access control, right? Each system refers to a door forced open as a different thing in its output. And so you can't just take those 5 spreadsheets and put them together and tell AI, hey, make this make sense. It doesn't work. You have to also give it the translation script to understand that from this system, it's called this, from this system, it's called this, from this system, it's called that. And then here's how we normalize it in the underlying system. And that's going to be true across all of these different pieces of tech.